hit on the philosophy of PMP. And as I'm talking right now, we are live. Listen, everyone, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the What's Your Story. Listen, Ashley, I don't know. It's like a live coaching / interview / it's just a slash show. All right. We just slash.
Right.
slash
within slash.
You guys are going to be so blessed to hear Ashley Shuler's story today. She was just breaking down to me the philosophical construct of project management. And I was like, oh, okay. She knows what she's doing. So Ashley's a brilliant mind. And so guys, what I'm going to do is without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and read you her intro. And then Ash, we're going to get right into your story. So Ashley Shuler is the founder and business system strategist of Shuler Strategies Group. And her superpower, I love this, by the way, because, you know, if you deal with the hero's journey and, you know, so her superpower is the innate ability to take big picture ideas and organize them into digestible components for execution. I'm going to pause there because Ash, you know what? Let me tell you something. Okay. User experience design is very similar. And I think that's how we kind of, you know, how we connected, right? Because we were talking about how, and so being able to be that person who thinks big, but then to just like deconstruct all of these big pictures.
That's it.
Whew, I'm getting excited, but this isn't my intro. This is your intro. So Ashley also creates structure for small business owners and teams through a few things: coaching and consulting on projects, team productivity, and content operations. Now, with a background in project management, policy, and digital marketing, her goal is for entrepreneurs to take the guesswork out of their business and implement those systems and processes so they can operate more efficiently. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ashley Shuler. Now, I'm probably the only one clapping because nobody else is going to clap on the other side, but let's go.
I love that.
So for those of you who are new to understanding What's Your Story, let me go ahead and zoom in for you and let you know what this is all about. So what Ashley is going to do is she's going to share her founder story in a 7 plot point story construct. Right. So she's going to begin with her backstory, which humanizes her as an individual. She breaks down the who, what, when, where, how, why of just where she's starting in what we would call the ordinary world in the hero's journey. And then she gets to the catalyst. The catalyst is like the call to adventure. This is where she'll understand that there's something more to what is in the ordinary. Usually it's a person, but it can also be an event or a situation that occurs that positions her to just think about certain things differently. And then there's a big event. The big event can be traumatic or it can be really great. It can be a euphoric experience. Maybe it's a promotion. Maybe it's perhaps a loss of life, but whatever it is, it pinches her to slingshot into the midpoint. Now, the midpoint is the point of no return, guys. This is where we call in the hero's journey crossing the threshold. Now, this is where she is deeply motivated to, in this case, be the founder, to be the full-time entrepreneur that's going to start her group, her strategy group. And then right after that, there's always a crisis. Have you guys ever wondered when you always say, I'm all in, I'm going to do something, and then there's trouble that hits, the opposition actually hits? This is what typically happens after you say you're deeply motivated to do something. The opposition is almost in a sense a test to see whether or not you're really serious, or if you are made of what you're supposed to be made of in order to make this thing work. And then the climax is where you realize that you are. And so she's going to hit on the final showdown where she's going to break down what it is that it took, or what it is for her to realize and to understand that she had everything that she needed to begin with to overcome those challenges. And then the last thing is realization. This is the huge acknowledgement. And this is where Ashley now is going to break down to us what is happening right now in the business. Or if there's still a challenge, it may be, you know what? I haven't won just yet, but I am the winner. Okay. And then after that, guys, she's going to break down to us our universal principles, life applications, where she will break down and tell us each in 5 principles on what the detail of her founder story is all about. Okay. So Ash, it is on you. I'm going to go ahead and be silent on this end and talk to us about the backstory. Where do we begin?
Okay. I mean, we begin literally when I was working as a contractor for a government agency. And what was cool about this particular office, and it was the Economic Development Administration, and what the one of the offices within that focused on entrepreneurship. And the team that was assembled were not your typical government agency, meaning that they hadn't have a long career. These were individuals that had their own businesses and that they, came and worked and they were appointed in this office. So I was really privileged to be the project manager for a national council. And so what was so cool about that is I was just around all these entrepreneurs. I had never thought of even like an inkling of like entrepreneurship could be a pathway for me. Like I wasn't even thinking about it. And so I began to just hear all these stories, right, about what they were doing in their businesses and whatnot. And I began to just learn a lot about it. And I was like, well, you know what? I said, now what would be really interesting? Like, what could I do? Like that was in my mind. I was like, what could I actually do? And the funny part is I probably have not even like told a lot of people about this, but the first idea I had was I was like, let me solve the problem of dog boarding facilities and their inability to actually update, like me as a dog owner, like update me on the status of like what's going on with the dog in terms of like walking, in terms of the condition, in terms of how, if they were having fun. And I felt like that was an issue. I felt like that was like a problem because I'm like, if you're going and you're checking on your dog, your pet, that, isn't there like an automated way to do that? Isn't there like a way to be able to, have that where you don't have to call all the time? Like, can't there be like an app or something that you can log into or be able to get updates? So that was like my very first, like, let me see if I can problem solve for this. And I remember spending evenings like going through different dog boarding facilities in my area, my local area. I mean, I put together probably like a crazy spreadsheet just with all this information of like what technology did they use, like what, like literally going through their onboarding process of when you go and drop off your pet. Like, what's the process? What were all their activities that they had? What did they use to check out? Like, what type of software did they have? Did they have online booking software? It was like a whole thing. It was a whole thing. But I didn't let go of that idea because I was like, I didn't, it was like things where you just don't, I wouldn't know where to start with the apps and all these different things. But the idea in terms of starting to just research, listen to podcasts, understand people's story of why they start their own businesses became something that I was incorporating in my everyday life. So just beginning to just educate myself in terms of awareness was a huge thing for me. There was like a huge thing. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. So the process of researching problems became something that was a part of your daily life. And then you mentioned something here. There's this awareness. What would you call that awareness of? It was an awareness or an awakening of what per se? What would we call that?
So this is a good question because if you are someone that in terms of, in terms of career, in terms of, you after college, you get a job and then, this is sort of it, that kind of thing, but it's not that can't be a fulfilling life at all. But I began to think about, there's people do other things. Like there's people, like there's like it was like another window. And then there was an aspect of people who are like, well, I also have a business and I also have a career and I balance both. And then I like that, so I began to think of ways that really were in terms of understanding like business and understanding the balance and work-life balance. It all became an awareness piece of how you can build your life. And it's sort of like Legos, being able to construct it in such a way where, you can actually be able to, kind of like if you went to like little Lego towns, like you can go and visit different areas of your life.
What would those like, let's say 2 or 3, maybe 4 blocks be? What would those blocks be? So constructing the life. what would you say those were?
Yeah, I would probably say it's this aspect of impact. I think that was
Okay.
huge, being able to have impact and making a difference, because a lot of the entrepreneurs that I was hearing their stories, and they were problem solving and helping
Mhm.
to give recommendations to the government, like you would be able to hear their stories of what they were doing as founders of their companies, like the impact that they were having, this aspect of, understanding like your customer, this aspect of, what is the actual mission and vision, and then how that directly relates to the work that they're doing. So
Right.
there was a lot of common themes that were intertwined, even though there were lots of diverse people on that particular council, from healthcare to STEM to, to other entrepreneurship activities, and things that they were doing.
Okay. Okay. So I've got that one. I've got the building block of impact. Any other building blocks? Because you did kind of unfold something here where you're talking about this awareness of a different way of constructing your life. Impact is one. What would you consider? What else would you consider? Now, and so maybe let me zoom out, because I think you might have mentioned it. Was it kind of this balance of being in a traditional workforce, but then also building, something for yourself? Was that
Right.
kind of okay?
I thought it was really powerful to be able to actually be able to see this aspect of entrepreneurship in terms of, this aspect of, okay, I'm going to start this business, and
Mhm.
I'm really going to, and whether in of course, starting it, yeah, you want to make money, right? That's one, this aspect of revenue, this
Right.
aspect of, looking at it through a different lens in terms of, even though there are traditional ways in terms of solving problems,
Mhm.
whether that is, like our cell phones, we went from, like that moment that we went from, what was it? I forgot, we call those like the Motorola phones,
Yeah, the
the
flip
flip
phones.
phones.
Yeah.
And then the minute we saw that little itty bitty iPhone, everyone was like, people were like,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
I needed this. So
Right.
that was a lot of what I was seeing, of
Mm.
like, oh, okay, people need that,
Yeah.
and that would be, whether it was, providing, maybe it was healthcare technology,
Mm.
and being able, so it was really seeing things in different lenses of how
Yeah.
people were solving problems, that was actually became really inspiring for me.
So you know what? Now this is interesting, because there might be a little bit of catalyst in there, but I'm going to hold that, because it might seem as if you need to pull some things apart before we move to the next piece. What I want to do is I want to look at just a little bit more on giving us some context. So we kind of got the who, right? So you're working as a contractor for a government agency at this point. This is what exposes you
Right.
to entrepreneurship. Let's talk about the where and the when. And you don't have to say like a year as far as when, but just kind
Yeah,
of,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So where are
So
we? And yeah, when is this happening?
so I was still, so I was still in this awareness phase, right? And this was, exploring about entrepreneurship. Then I went and actually worked for the private sector for a little bit. And this is where I was introduced into a marketing agency. And this is where I was first introduced to user experience. I was
Oh,
introduced to web design, client avatars, and understanding this aspect of how marketing, branding, strategy, and all of that apply to, and how they serve so many different people, whether
yeah.
it was like businesses, government agencies, other companies. And I started literally, it was too funny, because once I got there, and I have this background, like this is policy, this is project management,
Mhm,
this
mhm.
was an opportunity where this was just something different for me to actually just explore, just a different position. And I
Yeah.
literally was like, okay, well, you know what? This is just me like learning. I'm in the deep end, I feel. No floaties. And I
Yeah.
was like, let me see,
Yeah.
what I can do, how I can add value. And
Mm,
so one of the things I did was I just made sure every department that I was aware of,
mhm.
I would go up to that person. I would, whether we were getting, coffee or whatever the case is, to learn about what all this is, learning about
Mm,
SEO, learning about user experience and learning about user design. And those teams were really cool, especially the user experience folks, because I would ask these questions in terms of like, okay, if we are on this particular project, what do we mean by making this particular website, like making sure that the user design experience is, needs to be flawless, or whatever, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I'm asking it also from the perspective, because it's also like, I don't know, you
Right,
got other people
right.
who are like, they've been in the game, and
Yeah.
I'm sort of in as a new person. But I think that what was cool is that the individuals found that to be refreshing, because they actually took it from my perspective of someone who may not know the deep knowledge. So they were like, okay, well, we do things like, the website crawls, and we do things like that. So we're able to actually understand in terms of the wireframes and things like that. So I began to understand how all these pieces, in terms of debuting, like we always see the finished product of a website, but we're not seeing everything that goes into the strategy, the design. It's not the logo. It's not the logo. It's not the colors, right? It's really looking at what is the vision that somebody has, and then breaking that down. And so I think for
speaking my language,
speaking your language, exactly. And so I think for me, when I was in that environment, something, I don't know what you call a node, a nodule, I don't know what you call, but there's a part of the brain that was literally awakened to think of solutions in a different way, like to think of things in such a different way. And so
I'm gonna pause you right there.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think that this right here could possibly be your catalyst, working at that marketing agency. Would that be accurate?
Okay. Yeah, that would be absolutely accurate.
I'm going to put that there. But then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to, let me make this smaller right quick. I want us to kind of look at understanding, what were you doing as far as, I'm definitely struggling over here. What were you doing as far as, well, not what, but where were you as far as your original, in the original backstory, being a contractor? Where was that? So let's kind of paint that picture a little bit, and then we're going to transition, and then because we've got some great information here. So where were you? When was this? And then also maybe even how did you get to the point where you decided to work as a contractor? So let's deal with the when, where, and the how, and then we can transition to the next one.
Absolutely. And part of my life purpose or in goals and things that I hold true in terms of who I am is fundamentally working in terms of policy, working in terms of understanding how to construct solutions for underrepresented populations, and also understanding even the operations and the policies within particular agencies and groups and organizations. That has always been an interest of me. That has always been a passion of mine. That's always has been a thing, that's for me. That's one of my, I guess you would say, one of my tenets, a part of who Ashley Shuler is. So for me, being a part of organizations and groups that worked on policy, that worked on operations, and in those aspects was always of interest to me. And so this was in terms of, I think this was like 2014 and 15, this was, I think, around, in terms of the backstory time, I think this was around that particular. And so I just happened to apply, for this particular role, and then was brought on and literally to, manage this particular council in conjunction with the director and some of the other senior leaders. And then their job was to, make recommendations. We had sub working groups, and we, did all of this really fantastic work in terms of commerce, in terms of, making recommendations and things like that. So, yep.
Okay. So I put here, so around 2014, you applied for this role as the contractor. You always had a deep interest in policy and operations in regards to, teams. Would you say, did you say government as well? I think you mentioned government, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Government. So one more piece just before we get to this next fleshing out the catalyst here, because you've mentioned some great things here, and I love the fact that you mentioned awakening. What how should I frame this? Okay, so I want to deal with the where. So like, where in the world was Carmen Sandiego? So
Yeah.
with the where, let us know where in the US were you, and then also for people who are just like, but how did she get to become a contract? Like, what did she do? Tell us that. So where you were, and then also like, what did you do to get to that? Like, did you finish school to get there? Like, what was it? Did
Oh,
you,
sure.
yeah. And I think that would
Yeah.
kind of solidify for people who are like, but
Yeah.
I want to do what she's doing. What is she doing? So,
What is she doing?
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of how I got there into that particular role, I had completed my master's degree in public policy.
Okay.
So I had gone back to school because I wanted to, again, learn more about what are some of the foundational components of policy making, and really kind of get into those aspects of it. So I really wanted to, and so that was a part of it. That was also part of my journey of, going in making a career path right into other organizations and other agencies, and really being a part of this aspect of solution building and that type of thing. So that is essentially what I did. And then I went what was going on, I was on the Hill I was on Capitol Hill for I don't know, maybe it was like half a year, or maybe it was because it was in between my summer of or the spring of when I graduated, and then in the fall is where I started when I was at Commerce. So yeah, so that's where I was on the Hill, and that was super cool just to be over there, working on a Senate committee. So I was doing that, and then applying just for different roles and positions. And then when I applied for this, then I got the phone call. It was like the bat signal. Hey, there's this come to interview for it, X, Y, and Z, boom. And then that's how I got started.
Gotcha. I like that. So, listen, for those of y'all that are trying to even still figure out, well, how did she even get to Capitol Hill? Y'all are going to have to reach out to ask, because it's interesting. When I hear stories like these, I think that usually some of the questions like, well, what did they do and how did they get there? And so I like that you gave us, a little bit more context, because it now makes more sense that, you working on the Hill, not as an intern, right? Was this like, was this part of the master's program, or was this like right after?
No, this was post. This was like post.
Okay.
Yeah, this was post. Yeah.
So, so being able to do that and then transitioning into, what would we call this, by the way? What kind of contractor were you considered? And I have here econ administration. When you saw the role, what did it say? Like, what was like the title, so to speak?
I think the title was project manager, and it was a project manager for, and it named like the council and named the work. And so the work interests me. So it was aspects of, being able to, again, this aspects of people, process, and outcomes. So it was, we have a council, and this is what their charge is. We need someone to just arrange and basically, lead up those efforts in terms of what they are, what we've charged them to do, keep track of milestones, recommendations, help, assist the director in terms of what she needed to know, and in terms of, their particular recommendations they had, different types of meetings that we were in. And so it was, so that's what stood out to me. And I was like, oh, I can do this. Because that's good. Even in a lot of ways, we are all managing our projects, like we were talking about before we went live. And we are already doing some of this work, already. Right. So that was what I felt. I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. I was like, why not? So that's what prompted me. That's what prompted me.
I like that. And, and you have you've got the academic, acuity, and then you also working on the Hill definitely made a difference too, which led to you saying, oh yeah, project manager, contractor for a government agency. Yeah, we're good to go. So
Yeah.
I just want you guys to know, like, as we're going through this process, that, Ashley just didn't come out of nowhere and just said, I'm going to be a, it started with her passion, policy making, and that then led down a track that she did, her graduate work. She did, the post grad, career, which started, working in the spaces, in government, where it then now led to this awakening. She put here, it led to the awareness of how to construct life with certain building blocks, like making an impact, full-time work and what that looks like, and then also entrepreneurship. So I'm going to transition now to your catalyst. And your catalyst could be, now let's we I don't know yet, but your catalyst is you then work for a marketing agency and and was introduced to UX design and how marketing, branding, and strategy affects business, local government, etc. And I'm just rereading this so that way you can also hear it. And you proactively learned about the other roles and responsibilities from your colleagues, such as SEO and analytics and design experience. And what this did was it awakened you to think of solutions in a different way. Is this accurate so far?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to know about this catalyst before we get to the big event? It seems as if the catalyst here is the awakening, right? Think about solving
Absolutely.
problems, from a designer lens, right?
Mhm.
Design thinking, and for the sake of what we're talking about here. What happened after the catalyst? What big milestone or event happened before you said, okay, we need to do this. We need to found a company?
Well, what was so interesting about that work that I was doing is I was assigned to do Google Analytics. It was strategy, but it was also like analyzing the data and actually coming up with and also writing reports. And so I was charged to do that work. And it was something that I was consistently doing well and really liked doing. And I began to see patterns in terms of people asking me, meaning people, friends or friends of friends, just asking me different questions about whether it was content, whether it was, things that they came across. And I would,
Right.
and because of what I was learning, I was just sharing my thoughts and said, well, I think, this could be the issue. And here's where I would look, or you definitely need, if you're doing this website, definitely you need to install Google Analytics. And so it began, I began to think to myself, shouldn't other people be utilizing this? I wonder if this could be a service. I wonder if this could be a particular service. And coupled with that, I was on a board for a nonprofit where I was learning MailChimp and I was doing the newsletters. And so email marketing became a thing for me as well. So I would go and I would do the HubSpot certifications. I began to read, some books and things. And so I really have and still do love this. I love email marketing. And I think there's just it's just great for all types of people and businesses and,
Right.
in all sorts of different industries. So that was what I was thinking about. I was like, well, I could do that. I could go and connect with small business owners if they are wanting to understand what's happening with their website. I could do reports and I could go and I could provide my recommendations. And then if they need to also learn MailChimp and also set up email, I was like, I could do that too.
Good. That's good. So I'm gonna put here because I think I missed some things. When I say missed, I was listening, but I don't think I translated it fully. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of come back here. So you've mentioned, so you're consistently doing your work well. I put here Google Analytics and content strategy. Am I missing anything else? Because you obviously did more than just that, obviously, so I wanted, let's list out, with all of what you were doing, which started to have other people inquire, and ask you questions about what you were doing, even though they've been there before you, but you were doing these things. So yeah, go ahead and give me the rundown of the list, and then we're going to go to the next piece, because I think that this is good right here.
Absolutely. So Other things that I was doing in terms of the Google Analytics reporting and doing that content strategy piece. I also was on a few different projects in terms of doing surveys and collecting data, and then also, and also, what is it? Writing out that information in terms of, what was the story of from that data. So I learned a lot about what it means to survey people, what types of questions to ask. That was huge. I would be a part of, putting together presentations also with teams, and just in terms of how to present in terms of strategy is concerned, present information to clients in terms of what their requirements were, what was the status of the projects in terms of the teams that I was a part of. So yes, absolutely.
This is good. And so with all of that, you started sharing your expertise with other employees, but you mentioned something. There's something that happened. They asked you, right? Like, what did they do? They were coming to you and asking you questions, which I think then sparked the idea, if they're asking me so many questions, clearly there's a need for this somewhere else. What was it that they were really asking you about or for?
Well, I want to make a small edit. It started to be asking, people would ask me questions outside of work, people outside. So it was a different, so it was friends, it was different people from different, organizations that I was volunteering being a part of. But at the same time, though, there were different insights that I would be able to add, because again, this particular group, this was marketing, this was private sector. I also had the other hat of understanding how government agencies work. So if we had clients that had that, I knew from the lens in which they were thinking. So definitely, if there were certain things in terms of how to present certain information, how, maybe, understanding maybe some of the words that needed to be used, how to actually position an angle, I would absolutely be able to offer that perspective for sure.
Okay. That's good. That's good. So this thought, I think, would be your big event. The thought of, I'd be able to do reports. I'm going to put here, because qualitative research is definitely part of what you were doing here. And provide your recommendations to those outside of, because obviously you would need to do that for those who are working with you, right?
Absolutely.
So who needed your services. And what would you say would be the main service if you had to kind of prioritize what was like the biggest or the most repeatable thing that you were sharing and that you were demonstrating outside of the workplace? What would that thing be? Would it have been email marketing? Would it have been data analytics and reporting? What would have been the top thing?
It would, I think when I was doing that work, it was data analytics and data analytics reporting, and then the email marketing. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And that solidifies that. So this is big. Listen, guys, if you're watching this, I want you to understand that this is still considered a big event. The big event was this idea that I can take my expertise, right? Ashley took her expertise and decided to leverage that outside of the workplace. Now, many times we think that this milestone has to be like some major, like I won $1 million or whatever the case. I don't know.
Right.
But it's so, and this is why I love doing this, because in real life, there's not any background music. There's no movie score.
Right.
Although I wish there would be, I wish there was a movie score when you had that thought, that epiphany is like, you know what? I could do this outside. And then the orchestra will start swelling, but that's not how it is in real life, guys. However, your even your thoughts or the epiphanies that you have, the pivots that you make, as small as it may be for you, that could just very well be the key that unlocks you to what we're going to hit now is Ashley's midpoint. This is her point of no return, or where she's deeply motivated to just plunge into the world of entrepreneurship. So, Ashley, let us know what happened after you had that thought. Just go ahead and let us know.
So what I did was I filed my LLC. So I said, okay, this is perfect. Shuler Strategies Group. We're in the mix. So we're putting that information together,
Mhm.
sending that off. And then I start, okay, let me look at this website and start that, start go and, I went on Wix and I said, I can do it myself
Mhm.
and start to build this thing out. So I said, okay, here are what my services are going to be, and I started with that, I think. And then I went
Mhm.
and got my Instagram. I went in and got in an Instagram, and then I started posting. I did start letting people know what I was doing, but I was just scared. And so there was a lot of just freestyling efforts going on.
Yeah.
And the funny part of this was that I fell into doing like Wix websites for I did like 3 projects worth of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so therefore I was moonlighting as if as a website, because people liked what I did.
Yeah.
And there was a few people that were like, hey, could you, do this? And I'm just like, oh, I don't really
Come for
know,
it, but
but,
yeah.
but, I was like, okay, let me just try it. And what those projects taught me a lot about how to have a client experience,
Yeah.
how are you understanding client requirements,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And really understanding this aspect of what is the right fit,
Yeah.
you just be, and understanding too, just because you might even at a certain level, you've mastered something, whether you mastered it at a 2, doesn't mean that you necessarily need to like dive into that. that's
Right. Yeah.
that that
It's
that
true.
that taught me a lot. And then
Yep.
when I started considering, I was like, well, I do like it, but like, should this be what I should be doing? And I started looking at what web designers do, and I was like, you know what? At the time, I was like, I don't think I have the capacity,
Mm.
or to really to actually commit to doing the full blown understanding the coding, because that's what I would really go full blown into. Like I would go
Yeah.
into like the coding, and I would go into all this aspect of web design, go back into user experience courses. Like I would be doing like the full scale of the whole thing. And I was like,
Yeah.
and that was my thing. If I was going to do it, I was going to go full into it.
Right. 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 Yeah. The all or nothing. Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I resonate with that.
Absolutely.
So I want us to back up just a little bit more. So the big event
Yes.
was this thought. You said, okay, I will be able to do, and I want to put here because reports just sound so superficial. Like I know you're doing more than just that, but so I'm gonna just write it again. So data analytics, and qualitative research. Were you doing any design experience or any design work in the big event outside of?
No, I
Okay,
was
so it was
not. No,
really
I
just
wasn't.
okay, which is okay, but email marketing though, right? I think because that's what
Mm-hmm.
we mentioned. Okay, cool. So you were doing that, and then what was the moment when you said, "Were you still working at
Yes.
the?" Okay, so you still were working your 9 to 5. So it wasn't
I
that
still
you
was
were.
working. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
at that point I had transitioned to another role. So I did, yeah. So at that point I
Okay.
actually, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's important to put because some people may think, oh, so she just left her job, and no, guys, she was still working. So
Yeah.
so when you said that you were moonlighting, the moonlighting was really your building the web the Wix websites, but with the understanding that you're going to be doing more than just web design. You just so happened to start
Absolutely.
off with
Yeah,
the
because
okay,
it was like,
got it.
yeah, people wanted to, I was like, okay, folks were like wanting to like saying, we've worked together, we've been a part of organizations together. Like, okay, you're doing this thing, like let's do it, and so that's how it became. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so at this point, what was your role considered when you were at the marketing agency? What was your title there?
I think it was a marketing. It might have been it could have been like marketing analyst. That's what I believe it was, marketing
Okay,
analyst.
That's good. So created Shuler Strategies Group. You had this thought, there's going to be value outside of, my
Absolutely.
business. So you did that. You designed the website, you listed your services, you set up social media, you kind of were tinkering around with the posting. So kind of
I
organically posting.
I was
But
without any just going out there.
right. Still kept the day job as a marketing analyst. And I put here accidentally because it was like it was accidental, but not right. Like, I mean, you set up everything for it to happen,
Right.
But yet you didn't expect to be a web designer to start out. So,
Absolutely.
and that makes sense. And the lessons learned were included, how to have a client experience, who's the right client, focusing on the scope of services, or the niche. So this is good. This is good. So we would call this your midpoint. I'm thinking though, was there anything else that we need to know before we hit the crisis? Because the crisis is designed to push back or to have you question whether or not you should have filed that LLC to begin with. So was there anything else that we needed to include or to have? And maybe not, right? Maybe it can be a little bit different. But the reason why I say that is because for many entrepreneurs, typically, they have the typical path of leaving one thing, pulling the ripcord, so to speak, going all in. And then it's like, man, as they're floating with the parachute, like, where am I going to land?
Right.
Now for others, that may not be the case, right? They're still managing both, and so the crisis could very well be, can I do, both full-time job and, entrepreneurship? Yours might be somewhere in the middle, So what would the crisis be? And if there is no crisis per se, perhaps we need to revisit what your midpoint truly was. It may not have been filing the LLC and starting to moonlight. It could have been maybe doing something further along, and then the crisis hits. I don't know, just kind of throwing that out there as you kind of think about what you would consider your crisis. And by the way, your crisis doesn't have to be traumatic as if, I had to file for bankruptcy the first time. It doesn't have to be like that either. So everybody's crisis is different. And it's really, and here is, I'm going to zoom back over here. Your crisis is typically what pushes you to sometimes, if not often, go back to your backstory, go back to what's comfortable, to be the economic administrative, policy making contractor. I just like strung up all of your work.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love it.
So that being said, so I'm going to go back to this crisis piece. And walk us through that.
Sure. I think for me, and there's a lot that I think happened between, there was the filing of the LLC. I was doing a few of the websites. I was still working, and I transitioned to another role. So I was, working, for the government. Right. And then what happened is I started to, I joined a personal development group outside of work. So, and this was an online organization called Breathe University by Dr. Eric Thomas. And so I began to understand a couple of things. Leadership became a really important aspect to, I was developing, just in terms of I was leading, and I was a part of a group that was a team of project managers, right? And so inside of that, our role was to go and just be deployed into different groups and help with the scope and help with the budget and help with, putting together a process, right? In terms of that type of work. And then I got my PMP because I said, well, I want to just be able to add more value. I want to be able to make sure that I'm understanding what exactly is happening, even in the nitty-gritty details. So me and my colleague, we went and studied, and I remember I studied for 4 months. I had this crazy routine, and asked someone ask a couple of people, what was your strategy and approach for studying for the PMP? I went and adopted it. And I remember I studied for 4 months, took the boot camp that they have that's required. It's 35 contact hours for that. You do that. and then you take the test. You apply, you put in an application, you apply, and then you get approved to take it. And so I was doing that. So I was studying. I had lots of books. I took it old school. I was pen and paper with it. It was like a whole thing. And then I passed, passed on the first try, which was fantastic. And as I began I started seeing things in different perspectives with actually studying for the PMP and then actually continuing that learning through a couple of other certifications. When I started working on these projects, I was like, oh, you know what? I've always had, a thing about arranging, going back to people, process, outcomes, arranging people, activities, outcomes, deadlines, and always, how do we operationalize? How do we put together the system to do X, Y, and Z? And literally, I said to myself, well, I wonder if this is something that other people need. Again, into this entrepreneurship. I was putting on another hat. I was like, do people need this? In my mind, I was like, do people need this aspect of organizing things and being able to execute on, you know what I mean? So that became a thought in my mind of like, I could use this. Like I could be like a consultant in this area, but still conflicted in terms of, the email marketing and the data analytics. And I just soon had to kind of just let that go off to the sunset, like let that boat go away, because rather I had a lot of great knowledge and I was reading books about it and I was, talking to individuals, but I didn't necessarily have clients, in that area. Like I just wasn't, it wasn't gelling for me. It still wasn't gelling for me. But what was gelling for me was getting, and again, this is probably even getting to more even the climax. So I know I'm probably just even going ahead, but
this is good.
But this is good. So what really came down to it was I had to make a decision in terms of like what actually was going to be the superpower that I was going to leverage and to strengthen, like what was going to be the thing. And I remember being on a phone with one of my other coaches, and she was like, Ashley, she was like, I understand that you like X, Y, which we were talking about email marketing, but and then you're also talking about the fact that when you're going out and talking to different entrepreneurs, the thing that was actually vexing me was the fact that there was no process for me to get in touch with individuals, like that aspect of if customers need to get in touch with you, there was a strong like gap between like whether it was how do people send an email to you, how do you sign up for a discovery call. There's all these things that were missing and it was just hitting a wall. And so she really made me think about this. And this individual, her name is Nikki Saunders at This Is Nikki S on Instagram. But she really made me think about it and to be able to say, all right, you need to, pick the thing, right? And, and not that you can't do the other stuff, but be known for your one thing. And then you can build on top of that. So I was like, you know what? This operations, this systems, this project management piece, like going back to the beginning where you talk about the innate ability, that aspect of being able to pull things apart and then being able to put together the plan. Yeah, that always has come naturally to me. So I was like, let me lean into that. Let me lean into that and begin to actually find a way, right, to actually be able to make this work. Go ahead.
So I was gonna put here, and I wanted to do this before we go into, because this is good. Would you consider yourself a multi-potentialite?
Maybe. I think so.
And the reason why I'm going to put that there is because you have the capacity. I don't want to say not many people do, because that's what we try to tell our to tell youth, right? Whatever you set your mind to do, So, but
That's
without
it.
but without sounding cliche though, you have this capacity though that if you say, huh, that's interesting, you go and you do what needs to be done, the certifications, the license, whatever it is, to actually master that thing. And then that now that's a part of your skill set. And so now it seems like what's happening is you have too many. There I don't want to say too many, but there's a lot
Right.
that's happening. And
Absolutely.
the crisis is, which direction should I go? Is it which
That's
direction,
it.
or is it which? Because you mentioned your superpower. Does your superpower determine your direction, or what is the crisis for you? Is it where do you want to go, or what do you need to just keep and use in order to go? So what was the focus for you? Direction
For
or the
me,
actual?
for
Yeah.
me, it was direction in terms of, okay, what are you going to be known for in terms of how you can how are you going to be able to tell someone, what you're able to solve? You know what I'm saying? What's the they have a problem, what would be your response to the solution? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so
That's the
it
crisis
was
question right
still
there.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so even in answering that,
Mhm.
I was still, so I just leaned into this aspect of, okay, well, this is good. This is operations. This is the systems piece. Like, I can do that.
Yeah.
Like, and so I'd be able to have a couple of clients and be able to help in those areas. But something, and this might be either crisis the climax or like crisis number two, that's a spinoff. But what happened was,
Yeah.
is I'm a part of this other community, and there was a interview that was being done, and I went and watched it. Well, here's what I was doing. What was I doing? I was driving in the car, and I was on my way to do some meetup thing that I was doing, and I was listening to this particular business coach named Jordan Gill talk about VIP days and talk about this aspect of, what if you could take your service
Hmm.
and your skill set and like package it in such a way
Mhm.
that you can actually like do it in a day, like, being able to do that. And I
Mhm.
literally was driving someplace, and I think I went and parked on the street of some houses, because
Yeah.
I don't understand what she's saying. I was
Yeah.
like, what do you mean? I was like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, what do you mean that you could do that?
So
Like
24
that.
hour
And
turnaround, like
yeah, there was like a thing where it was like, yeah, and it was, it's called Done in a Day, and she has like a full-fledged program on this. And I was like so fascinated by that. And I was like, and so because I had typed in the Facebook group and I said, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing like observations, right? I'm seeing that people need folks to come in, organize their things, and
yeah.
then help them to streamline it. And I feel like I could do that and lean into that. Like, what is that called? Is there like a book on this? Is there like somebody I need to call? Like, and so someone had put, hey, I think you need to watch the the Facebook Live and watch this thing. I said, okay, I'll go ahead and do that. So that was what I was doing. So I went and I think I got like, oh, I found her Instagram. I plopped into there and I was like, hey, and I started typing. I was like, you do this thing. And I was like, I don't know if you're taking, people to do one-on-ones or whatever it is, but, I'd love to meet with you. Like, I don't, tell me your process. Like, let's do this. So that's essentially what it was, is that she was able, we met, and then I got into her 6-month coaching program called, it was called Done in a Day. And it talked about adding the VIP day business model to your thing. But the crisis was still in terms of what I can actually do, like what was still going to be the thing. And I had a few epiphanies where I was like, you know what? I could be boxing myself in or working too hard to get it right, like on the right thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I need to get it right. Like, I need to make sure this is it. And so even throughout that program, I had a virtual summit. What was it? A virtual conference
Oh, can I pause?
VIP day.
Can I pause here?
Yes.
Because so
Yeah.
keep the conference VIP day in
Yeah,
as your
please
next
do.
thought here. So I'm going to put here the perfect choice, getting it right, and I think that is helpful because when we go back to when you obtained your PMP and some other certifications, that's your MO. You get
Hmm.
it, and you get it right on the first hit.
Yeah.
Like that's and so now you're in this space where it's like, man, like whatever decision that I make, I gotta make sure, that I get it done, right? And
Yes, that's
so,
exactly it.
yeah. So you know what? That could perhaps be another crisis, but I'm gonna put it here for now that you
Hmm.
realized that like you said, you're working here too hard to make a perfect choice, and getting it right. I'm gonna put here the first time, and now, yeah. So now let's talk about this VIP day because I think that you being a part of this 6 month training is like part of the final showdown. Just gonna
Yep.
help to unlock some things. So okay.
Absolutely. So being part of the coaching program, I actually developed maybe like three different types of VIP days. So because I was looking at it from the perspective of when we were talking about the definition of a project and how the definition a temporary endeavor that brings about a unique product, service, or result. And I was like, oh, I said, well, if people are wanting to put on virtual events, especially during the age of COVID and the posture that we're in, I was like, definitely people are going to need this. You know what I'm saying? Like people are definitely going to need this, the strategy behind it, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, it's always when I think about any type of process, any type of whatever the end result is, whatever the thing that someone's wanting to build or construct, I
Mhm.
always think of it into phases and being able to divide those phases up. So it's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then
Mhm.
it's always the arranging of activities that go under those phases. So for me, I'm always thinking in that way. So I'm thinking if somebody wants to have a virtual event, let's reverse engineer that. What are all of the components, and let's put that into phases and how you would complete those particular tasks, in terms of who do you need, what do you need to do, when do you
Mhm.
need to do it, and so I
Yeah.
began to look at that. And then, I was, during last year, I sold a few VIP days, but there was one that was actually in a completely different category, which was going back to this client experience piece, which I mentioned before, which was like, I'm looking to get in touch with folks, that there's an aspect of just having an acuity link, a scheduling link, how can I add value to those individuals that need to have a comprehensive client experience?
Right.
So
Right.
that was also a huge piece of it too, which
Mm.
was, so you have two again, two juxtaposing VIP days in different areas. So I needed to just
Mm.
so again, in terms of the client, I still needed to make a choice in
Yeah.
terms of what I needed to do.
Right.
So the theme of what I was hearing in terms of managing time, managing time better, organizing projects, how do I get my team, onboarded, and how do we do all these things? And so I was like, you know what? People, process, and outcomes. I was like, and I said, I need to fully lean into this aspect of project management consulting and being able to
Mm.
be that person that is helping people to understand how they can construct their projects in their business, how they can plan and organize and execute, and then also being able to utilize a tool, a project management tool, to be able to do that. And so that
Gotcha.
was a lot of it. That was really, and I guess maybe you get into the realization piece too that might dovetail into that. But
Yep.
I was really like, like it was literally like this, like August of last year, when I was like, you know what? These are the recurring themes that I'm seeing. And I said, I need to lean into that more. I said, I have to really lean into what I'm seeing, in terms
Right.
of that. And again, once you see something, you can't really unsee it. So I started
Right.
seeing
Right.
it. I was just seeing it everywhere. I was seeing it everywhere. Right.
And you know what? I'm gonna put here, and this just very well might be um, the dichotomy or the challenge for those of us who, and if you're watching, who think like how Ashley thinks, to kind of put aside the fact that you can create solutions and processes for virtually anything. However, it's not necessarily ignoring that gift, because that is a gift, but more so listening to what people are coming to you for repeatedly. And it's like, now
Mm-hmm.
that I see the pattern here, instead of me, listen, I think UX designers, I think we all have that a similar challenge where we believe
That's
that
right.
systems, blueprints, and processes can solve the world's biggest challenges, but we more so focus on those processes and systems versus, well, what have they been telling me the problems that they've had, and I could just take that one out of the
Yes,
many that I have and just deploy it to the group of people who have just been naturally drawn to how I'm
that's
solving
it.
problems to begin with. And I think that you hit something right on the money there. I'm going to put here. So let's flesh out this realization, that realization that, and help me with this, but that the people is more important than the process. I don't know. I'm trying to use your words here, but but help to correct that for me as this
I
big
will
realization.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, because here's the thing: it's people, process, and outcomes, and all three of them are interrelated.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay. And so it's understanding that, you, when you're working with a team, you're working, whether that is you're hiring contractors, whether that you are building and you're the CEO and you're building out your team,
Yeah.
there's always this aspect of people, process, and outcomes. And so I'm really huge on how do you get the work done and how do you get it done effectively.
Mhm.
And so we think a lot about how can we get it done quicker? How can we get it done faster? Let's
Yeah.
move on to the next thing. We've all done it.
Mhm.
But I am very much big on documenting that process, creating what the process is, getting team buy-in on the actual process,
Yeah.
having people understand their role within the process. And
Mhm.
then again, because that's going to lead to the actual outcome that you desired,
Yeah.
And
Right.
so this aspect of using that and using project management principles and best practices in that framework,
Mhm.
and also being able to teach it too in such a way where people can know this. Yes, there are 5 phases that that the Project Management Institute has, but this is again a framework, so you can take
Mhm.
it and then of course flip it and reverse it as Missy Elliott has taught us, and you can be able to go
Yes.
ahead and to do that, and you can
Yeah.
make it in such a way that's not cumbersome,
Mhm.
and you can do it even if you need it to be uh, high touch, or or what's the word, more, if you need to be more involved, sure,
Okay.
because there may be
Yeah.
things as you're growing, you maybe need to add some more things to the process, right? but
Mhm.
it's but it's what's working for that particular team, and also
Mm.
knowing too that works for one person, whether you're a solopreneur or a team, is going to be different for another individual.
Yeah.
You can't do an apples to apples comparison
Right.
because it's different. It's always going to be different.
So let's take that last piece that you just
Mm-hmm.
said. How do we turn that into your realization? Because
Mm-hmm.
you realize that even with your VIP days in the beginning, they were diametrically opposed as far as just like the solutions they
Sure.
were offering, and you're just like, listen, I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still creating these multiple. I need to find the one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So by you just saying though, every team is different, right? Even if it's a solopreneur, the teams are different, but you found a way to make the VIP day um, the same, even though it's solving different problems, right? Or
Correct.
different needs.
Yes.
Um, how do we turn? What's your realization there? And maybe I just said it just now. Maybe that
No,
maybe
no,
that should be what I'm
no.
writing down.
No,
But yeah.
no, you're on point. You're on point
Okay.
with that, because so one of the things that I was doing, even through, you know, understanding like what I was doing with these particular VIP days, I was honing skills with project management tools,
Mm, mhm.
using ClickUp, going and also looking and, at Asana as well, and actually just looking at it and studying the platform, using the platform itself,
Mhm.
understanding the power and how you can have this process and
Yeah.
then apply it to the tool to execute and get the work done. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I was like,
Right.
let me just go ahead and have a click up VIP day. Let me go ahead and have that VIP day where we're able to do a few things. We're able to help to streamline your operations, right? We're helping
Right.
to, what the projects that you have, and I have it, where it's outlined, it's up to 3 for my clients to choose from. And there's 2 different tracks. There is a content operations piece, which is different from, I'm going to create content and post it. This is like your process and your workflow, whether it's YouTube, podcasting, Instagram, and all those things. So there's a content operations track, and then it's also outlining what's your workflow and process for that. And then it is also this business operations piece where it is, what are the projects that you are working on? If you're happen to be a service provider, what does that look like in terms of your workflow? What are, do you have a daily operational, project list where what you're doing every single day? So there was,
Right. Right.
there's these aspects of, because I wanted to think of it in 2 ways, because I know that the common questions that I am getting is around, how do I stay organized?
Yeah.
How can I know what I'm doing each day? How am I, in terms of, if I have this project, how do I know what I need to do first, second, and third? So, so when I was looking at it through those lenses, and then I started seeing, I said, okay, this is people, process, and outcomes, helping a person, right? Understanding what their pain point is. We're defining this process. We're then redeveloping or creating a new one. And then we're getting that particular process piece. We're drawing a direct arrow to their outcomes, which is what they desire, which they want things to be less chaotic. They want it to be streamlined. They want to have a peace of mind, and they want to be able to wake up the next day knowing that they feel, ready for the day. I know what I'm doing. I can direct my team, or I can lead myself, and I don't have to feel like I'm spinning my wheels.
Right. Would it be safe for me, and that's good, would it be safe for me to say then that, and I'm about to finish this piece here, where you're able to streamline your services to address a variety of challenges while still using your diverse skill set without making processes bloated or confusing, overwhelming, where your own, and this is where I'm at here, where your and I guess I'm trying to address the fact that you found a way to take your necessary, and there's some skill sets that you kind of put to the side. I remember you saying this, right? Like email marketing and certain things. But yeah, just help me to finish that piece, because I think that this perhaps could be, and let me know if this is like the big picture realization where you didn't have to lose your identity or lose your the career capital, so to speak, all of the things that you've learned to serve clients who may not need all of the,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and yet they're getting everything that you've learned, but it's in a more simple way for them,
Absolutely.
How do we articulate that? I think I'm kind of there, but
I think you're there. So what's so cool about what you're saying in terms of what I probably want to categorize this as, almost like a spice rack. You know how you have like the different spices.
Yeah. I like it.
So what, so if I am talking with clients and they are talking about, whether it is, it could be email marketing, I could take the skill set of the spice rack, the email marketing, lift it, because I know about it. You know what I'm saying? I know about what goes into having, a strategy, what it means to do the workflow and that type of thing. So, and so I understand it from that perspective. And then I'm able to also hear things in a different way. And so for me, I'm always coming from the perspective, regardless of who I'm meeting with, I'm always coming from the perspective of understanding what is the thing that's giving them heartburn. What is also the other perspective or the other shift that needs to happen that's actually going to say, I haven't thought of it that way. So there's always those pieces that I'm always looking for. And then it's also presenting also the solution and the option. Oh, I see. This is how you want to do it, right? I see this is sort of how you've been operating. What
Yeah.
if we were able to make these few adjustments that were
Mm.
still able to get you to the same outcome?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Ashley, well, how would you do that?
You're right. Right. Right.
You know
Right.
what I'm
Right. Right.
saying?
Yeah.
And so a lot of, in terms of what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing a lot of times is, one of my favorite activities, I was telling someone last night about this, was my favorite activities is not just the actual build up in the project management tools. Like, that's always fun, like to be able to construct that. But
Yes.
honestly, like when you're using this particular app, I love this aspect of whiteboarding. I think that it is something that everyone should be doing,
Right.
because the fact that you're able to take a process and be able to like whiteboard it out and be able to have someone visually see it. That is what all my clients say when I do this part of my services. Is we go and I say, okay, we're going to have a strategy session, and I bring up the app, and I ask the questions, and we start from cradle to grave, and we go through it. And when they're able to actually visually see it, it's always, oh, okay, I see where maybe I can make this adjustment. There's
Yeah.
always, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
that's rewarding for someone to be able, because my thing is, at the end of that particular session, I do
Mhm.
want us to be on the same page in
Right.
terms of the direction that you want to go in.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So I hope I did you justice. What I'm going to do is
I
I'm going to
believe
zoom out here.
so.
And so before we finish, because I will go through this, I will do the run through. But before we do that, what are 5 key lessons, 5 principles that you want your listeners to take away from your story today? Now, remember, there are different versions of this. So we're going to do this based on the version that you gave today. And we typically start off with like an action word, and it's usually just a few words for each life lesson. And don't worry, if you go long, I'll just pull out the key, the essence of what you're saying, but we want to fit it into this box here. So what would be lesson number 1 based on your founder story that you shared today?
Absolutely. So one of them is definitely faith. That's
Okay.
one.
So now, what would you tell the audience about faith? What should they do with that?
Sure. I would just say it's two things: having faith in yourself, and then it's also having, and for me, it's also faith in God and understanding your purpose, understanding what you are supposed to be doing, in terms of the gifts and the talents you've been given.
Gotcha. So you know what I'm going to put here? Let's see. So we have faith in yourself and in God to understand your purpose. Um, maybe we, and I'll clean it up. I'll clean up to make it shorter. But this is good because you also mentioned something about about talent. And your gifts. So purpose and gifts. And so would you say this? Maybe is it? Would you say like maybe perhaps before that would be and this might be a little bit too spiritual for some, but that's okay. This is your story. This is your narrative. Seeking God to understand those things, or what would your take on that be? Or is that saying something totally different? Because you did start
Yeah,
off with
I
faith.
would
So
be. Yeah, absolutely. I would say it would be. I would be. For me, it is seeking God, and it's a part of, in terms of, if we're talking about the system of your morning routine. That's
yeah,
all. That's a part of it too. So I'm
okay,
up early, and that's really the first activity before I
yeah.
want to think about content. Before I want to think about you know
Mm,
client meetings and things like that.
yeah,
That's it.
that's good. That's good. What would be your next one? And that could honestly be another one, but what would be principle number 2?
The principle number two: take the risk.
Take the risk. Love it. Love it. And we know if they don't know what take the risk mean, then we can't help y'all. Y'all don't know what that
We can't-
um, number 3.
Number three is definitely, I want to say, probably just honing skills, and skill development. Yeah,
Okay. Hone skills. Let's push it a little bit further. Hone skills to do what?
I would say to develop your craft, to continue to sharpen and develop your craft.
Okay. Got it. Got it. And I'm gonna put here, yeah, sharpen. All right. Number 4.
Number four, number four would be community. building community. And I think that's super important in entrepreneurship.
Mm,
Reaching out, talking with people who are in different industries, talking to people and getting to know their particular founder story, right?
yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah,
being able to connect with individuals and building a community for sure.
Okay. So instead of a build, let's say maybe find, because for something like I don't know how to
Find,
build it, so we're gonna say, well, it already
find,
exists. Yeah.
find and
Find and
connect.
connect. Yeah. With a community of, and in this case, we're talking about entrepreneurs. So um, now for you, it may not be if you're not an entrepreneur, then it's not a community of entrepreneurs. But if you're an entrepreneur, you definitely want to find that community. All right. And
Yes.
number 5, last but not least.
Last but not least, I would say integrity.
Mm. What integrity do you want to say?
For integrity, I want to say always being honest with yourself. Being honest with yourself and being honest in everything that you do, your actions, and that just translate everything from, your sales calls to the work that you do, absolutely.
Got it. I'm going to put integrity here. Hey, Ashley, this is great. Now, what I'm going to do is we have reached the finish line. we are done. So I'm going to begin with your backstory. Now I'm flipping over here, so I may not be able to see you. So if there's anything that I've said that isn't accurate, just go ahead, make a verbal cue and just interject, and I will go ahead and fix it. So I just don't want this to sound good. It's got to be right. So because sometimes I may have mistyped something or missed something. So just want to make sure that your story is indeed factual. Okay, so everyone, this is Ashley Shuler's story, and it begins with her completing a master's in public policy to learn about the foundational components of policy making. After graduate school, she worked on Capitol Hill on a Senate committee before applying and getting interviewed around 2014 for a project management role as a contractor for a council in a government agency. And here's the thing, guys. She just didn't do this just to do this. She always had a deep interest in policy and operations, especially when it came to teams and government. So working as a contractor for this government agency that was focused on economic administration, this office, though, also dealt with entrepreneurship. Now that's interesting because as she's now this project manager for this national council, she is now exposed to exploring problem solving in an interesting way. So she asks herself, what could I do in this position that could help me to solve problems? Well, she actually solved the problem of dog boarding facilities. Now, this is interesting because you would think that it would be something connected directly to, what she's doing in the government space. No. And this is why I think it's so important is she started with what she was passionate about, what she was interested in. And so that's where she started with solving this problem, dog boarding facilities to update conditions of the pets, but using like an automated way to do this. Now, this onboarding process, dealt with dropping off the pets. It dealt with the software being used. The whole point is she explored everything around the whole idea of dog boarding facilities. And then she realized she didn't want to do that no more. And it's interesting because just because there's a problem that needs to be solved, it doesn't mean that you have to commit your life to solving it. This opened her to the understanding and to the awareness of researching problems that became something that she started now to do for her daily life. Okay, so it led to the awareness of how to construct life with building blocks, such as the impact of how her full-time work and how entrepreneurship will affect her community and her surroundings. How are we doing?
Oh, we're doing good.
Okay, great. Now, Catalyst. This is the call to adventure, guys. She then transitioned and works for a marketing agency, and she's introduced to UX design. This is so important because she's already started that process without maybe perhaps technically knowing that that was a process before, but now she's in a setting where she is now formally introduced to what it's called UX design, but she also is exposed to how marketing, branding, and strategy affects businesses, local government, and she proactively learns about the other roles. So now she's taking on responsibility or taking on the initiative to understand other people's responsibilities in her teams or in her company. So that's SEO, Google Analytics, design experience. And what that does is it awakens her to think of solutions in a different way. Now, she's holding on to that because now there's this big event. The big event is not like, her traveling the world and getting this aha epiphany. It's crazy because this event happens right in the very role that she's still in. Well, technically she transitions roles, but in the very company that she's in. So she's consistently doing work, right? In the same role, doing it very well. Google Analytics, content strategy, surveys, data collection, qualitative research, creating presentations for strategies and teams. And she started sharing this expertise to friends, colleagues, and professionals outside of work. So not only was she doing it well inside, but then there was this moment where she said, maybe I would be able to do these same things, data analytics and the reports and the qualitative research to provide recommendations to others outside of my agency who needed these services. So not only that, but on top of what she was also learning, she understood or was exposed to understanding email marketing using MailChimp. And so I added here, this is a colophon to her skills. The colophon is the thing that the wood shop workers, they unroll this, kind of the tool belt of all of their skills. And, they've got all these tools. And so she now adds another piece to her, her tool belt, so to speak. Now, the reason why that's a big event, guys, is because she now takes what is, in a sense, kind of maybe insular to companies and agencies and clients that understands that, and she blows it out to friends and colleagues who may not necessarily know that that's the solution that they need, but she's got the skill sets to expose them and to help them to solve their own problems outside of the marketing world. That's major. Not many people do this. Most times, a lot of marketing people stay with marketing other people and marketing needs. But she expands and goes beyond the agency to the average person who can benefit from what she's doing. And that leads us to the midpoint. This is the point of no return. This is where she's crossing the threshold, because as she's now starting to express and to share, not to express, but to share these her assets, her tool belt, her skill sets to people outside of the professional world, to an extent, guys. I mean, she's also connected with other professionals, but you know what I mean? Outside of the traditional agency realm, she decides, okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to create Shuler Strategy Group. I'm going to file the LLC. I'm going to design the website. I'm going to list my services. I'm going to set up my social media, and I'm going to tinker around with posting. I'll sprinkle, I'll post organically.
Right.
But here's the thing, guys. She just didn't do that and then leave her day job. She kept her day job as the marketing analyst. Not only that, but she had a few clients that came in, and so she started moonlighting as a Wix web designer. And the lessons that she learned was, number one, how to have a client experience. Number two, finding the right client. Not every client that needs a website is the client that she should have. And then number three, focusing on the scope of services, focusing down on a niche. And this is actually going to lead us to the crisis, because at this point, she has so many tools. And I think that we're probably going to use that as the imagery right now. She's got a lot. She's building the tools. The tool set is, the toolbox is getting filled. And so what she also does, though, in this space during this time, is she joins the leadership development community, Breathe University. She also attains her PMP. So that's the project management professional certification. And then she starts to see things now through another lens called people, process, and outcomes, after joining the community and obtaining these certifications. So as you can see, she's starting to see things through different lenses based on the skill sets and based on the certifications and the learning that she's mastering. It's changing how she's viewing the world and how she's solving problems. But that's where the crisis comes to play. The crisis comes into play because as she identifies with being a multi-potentialite, the question is, what am I going to be known for? I've got all of these things. I can do all of these things. I know all of these processes, but I need to hone in on what my superpower is going to be. What will I leverage for this next season in my career? And so one of her mentors, Nikki Saunders, actually challenges her to be known for the quote unquote one thing. I think the crisis question number 2 really is more in the climax. So that's like I left that blank. But here we are in the climax, where How does she do that? How does she hone in on the one thing? Well, she decides to join a 6-month coaching program that helps her to productize a service within a 24-hour turnaround. So this is the VIP day. It pushes her to niche down and to simplify her process. Because when you've got all of these tools, you know all of these processes, we very well might overwhelm our clients with what we know versus what they need. And so even at this point, in this climax phase, even though she's realized that she's been working too hard to try to even make a perfect choice and getting it right the first time, she still had a juxtaposing like VIP day where one service offered this and another service, another VIP day offered that. And so she still needed to hone in. So she decided, guys, to focus on what she realized she understood in her midpoint, which is focusing on people, process, and outcomes based on the repetitive needs that the clients were already articulating to her. She didn't need to create or to think this. There were already patterns that were pre-existing that were coming towards her. And so now, as opposed to just being aware to the processes, she now is aware to the people that were bringing these challenges to her. So this people, process, outcomes, as she understood, are all interrelated. And while all of these variables differ in every company or team, Ashley was able to streamline her services to address a variety of challenges while, and this is really important, guys, while still using her diverse skill set without making processes bloated or confusing or overwhelming to the client. And so she has now 2 tracks, the content operations track and the business operations track. So she uses a spice rack analogy, being able to use the right seasoning at the right time for the right client. And this is important because being able to preserve her own identity as a talented and diverse project manager while still keeping the strategy simple and executable for her clients. Now, that is her story. Here are her 5 lessons. Number 1, you got to seek God to understand your purpose and gifts. If you don't do that, you might be accruing all other kinds of stuff that you probably don't need at this point in time in order to serve and to help other people. So seek the higher power to understand what you are gifted in. What is your purpose? Number 2, she says, take the risk. Enough said. Number 3, hone skills to sharpen the craft. Number 4, find and connect with a community of entrepreneurs. And number 5, be honest with yourself and your actions. That's called integrity. Ashley, that is your founder's story.
Woo! I'm telling you what, that was great. That was super cool.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. What I want to do is I want to thank you so much for just being transparent, and vulnerable to sharing this process and your story with us. But before we go, what do you want people, shameless plug, what do you want people to know what you're working on? We know that we can find you at ashleyshuler.com, but what are you working on right now? Or, what do you want to share that, where people can find you, just anything, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. Look, a couple of things. I definitely want you to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Ashley Shuler on LinkedIn. You'll see that pop up. And then also too, Instagram at Ashley Shuler _ on Instagram as well. And then definitely tap into my podcast, Conversations with Ask Ash. And it's a super cool podcast. If I don't, just say to myself, it's cool because what I'm doing right now is actually releasing them quarterly, and there's always a theme, and there's always a particular theme that involves this aspect of people, process, and outcomes. And so the first one of season 1 really just talks about some fundamental skills, just in terms of team productivity, documentation, talk about client experience. And then I have a season that's up right now that's called the Trailblazer season. And it's really all about people who've just taken a different path that beat to their own drum in the most positive way. I mean, they share their stories, and we talk about what are their particular systems, even though they're not even outlined in a quote unquote systematic way, but you'll
Yeah.
be able to pick up on the systems that have helped build their life. And so then I have a solo season that is starting this week. It's called Order of Operations, and it talks all about how do you organize and manage your work, and how do you do it efficiently. And then I definitely invite you to talk with me via direct message about my VIP day, my ClickUp VIP day. And I definitely want you to chat with me about how to make things more organized and streamlined, so that you aren't feeling confused or you're not feeling stressed about the work that you're doing. And so we have a ball. We have a ball doing these VIP days. And so it's a great time to just look at your process, reevaluate it, construct it to the way that you work, and then you will learn and apply the tool and understand how to use it to your benefit.
All right. All right. Ashley, I want to thank you again. Stay on. We're about to end this broadcast. For those of you that just came in, you missed it, but you can go ahead, hit the replay, because this was a rich experience where Ashley shared her experience, not just as a project manager, but as an entrepreneur, and the journey that she took to where she is right now. All right, guys, be blessed, and we will catch you on the next one. Love y'all.